On this paraphernalia, I will. I'm as crazy. I'm going to hit the off button here in a minute. I don't hit him. I'm Cynthia, and I'm an alcoholic, and I'm also, this is my first time to speak, and this is a place I said I would never be. You would never find me in AA giving a speech, because I don't like, I'm so out of my comfort zone when I'm talking to a group, and I consider a group to be two or more. And so this is so far beyond my comfort zone, it's unbelievable. But I do want to thank you. I didn't realize this was your anniversary night, and so it's a real honor that you did ask me to come on your anniversary, because that's a special time for you. And I think it's an honor when people say, will you come share your story? It's always a lot more honor when it's somebody else and not me. But I do thank you for having me here tonight. In all honesty, I'll tell you in about 40 minutes if I'm still really mean that. But I tried to figure out how to do this, because I mean, there's just not a way to prepare for this. And I kept hoping that God would just hand me the cliff notes to my story, because I just didn't know what to do. But all I can do is tell you all what it was like for me. And I would just say, I think every one of us, if we were birthed from a human being, we were all raised in a dysfunctional family. It's just a matter of degree. And my family happened to be very dysfunctional. They could have been more dysfunctional, but they sure, by golly, could have been a lot less dysfunctional. And I'm going to tell you about an event that happened very early on in my childhood that predetermined how dysfunctional my family would be. And what happened was I was born into a family. My dad was Air Force. My mom was from Idabel, Oklahoma. You can't get more country, more redneck, more ignorant than redneck Idabel, Oklahoma. She was very sheltered. She's very naive. I have come to terms with my mother, and I'm not trying to do her inventory or be critical. The woman does not have a lot of common sense. She was very sheltered, like I said, very naive, very uneducated. She was doing the best she could. And anyway, she met my dad. They got married. They had me. I was 5 months old. He was in the Air Force. He was transferred to Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix, Arizona. And this was the event that it just predestined my whole family to be nutso. My dad, his job in the Air Force was to test jet planes, and that's what he did. In fact, my dad was one of the first guys who ever tested the first jet that could carry a nuclear bomb in it. I don't know if that's a claim to glory. That's just a fact. And my dad loved flying planes. He loved being a pilot. He loved flying. But he had told my mom that he was terrified of driving this thing because it was not balanced properly. The weight was wrong. The engine was not a sound engine. And he was really scared to test this thing. And so he had only tested, I guess, 2 or 3 times. And my mom, I'm 5 months old, she tells him she's pregnant again. 2 weeks later, he is called out on a time when he wasn't the one who was supposed to be testing the jet that day. Another person was supposed to, but he was sick. My dad was called in. The plane malfunctioned. He ejected from the airplane. They don't know. It was one of those that the hood pops open like this. He hit the top of the plane. They don't know if it rendered him unconscious, so he never opened his parachute, or they don't know if he just broke his neck and he died then. But that was that predetermined pretty much the state of my family after that. My mother was 19 years old, no education, no wherewithal to deal with this. And for example, one of the things that happened, she called her dad, my grandfather, to tell them that her husband had died. My grandfather had a heart attack right there on the spot and was taken to the hospital. My family unraveled so quickly, it was just unbelievable. And I was 5 months old, and my brother wasn't even around yet. I can't tell you the craziness of being in that situation. We did not talk about my dad. My dad was a god and a hero. I never even called him dad until I was in this program for a year. I never called him dad. He was Jim. We called him Jim, and he was a god. And by golly, you said Jim, and you said it in a sacred, holy way, and you just learned not to say that word. My brother and I never felt like that was our dad. We never had any claim to him. We couldn't bring up his name without everybody just being destroyed around us. My mother she moved into Idabel, back to Idabel with her parents because she had no education, no way to take care of us. She would take us to Holdenville, which is where my grandfather and my other grandparents were. And we'd be sitting around, we'd be about to ready to have dinner. My grandmother would be making the meal and everything. And then lo and behold, oh my gosh, I set this extra plate for Jim and I forgot he's not here. And then we would go into the trauma and the drama and the turmoil, and she would cry and rant and rave. And we were just little kids. My brother and I really didn't understand this. And then she would go running off into the backyard. And this went on. This is how my family dealt with this. This went on around me and Mark all the time. And Mark and I had no way to be able to say that we were hurting too. There was nobody we could talk to. We just didn't bring him up. He was somebody, he was some God that was over on some pedestal somewhere. My mom finally moved us to Norman, Oklahoma. And then later on, she did remarry. She married an older man. He had 2 stepsons who were 10, 11 years older than me and my brother. They were in their teens, we were little. This was not a good deal. My stepbrothers were into drugs, and this was back in the 1960s. My brother and I didn't have a clue what that was. And of course, my family didn't talk. We didn't discuss this thing. We didn't deal with anything. I was not close to my stepdad. In fact, it's really kind of, it was funny to me even then, and I laugh about it now. Dick was used to having teenage boys, and so he's not used to having 2 little kids. And he'd take us, we go get hamburgers, and he'd forget us. He'd just leave us. He forgot us, and he'd go home. And we were left all over the place in Oklahoma City. He forgot us. And boy, when we got home, the fireworks that hit, oh my gosh, my mother ruled the roost with an ironclad hand. And I even got where I thought it was just funny. I remember one time we went to go pick up some food, my brother, me, and Dick, and I loved this game. I thought, it was one of my joys of childhood, was watching this stuff go on. And my dad went in, my stepdad went in to go get the meal, and my brother was out there, and he was watching a parade. And so my stepdad gets the food, comes to the car. I get in the car with him, and I can see my brother over there in the parade. I know he's there, and I even waved at him. And so we get home, and they're like, hey, where's Mark? Oh, wow, I forgot him again. And I found this was my entertainment, folks. I loved being a part of this kind of spectacle. When I got to elementary school, I was in trouble all the time. I caused trouble all the time. By the time I got to elementary school, before I ever got out of elementary school, all 4 of my grandparents were dead. My grandfather, one of them, died of alcoholism. My mother, to this day, would tell you it was cancer of the liver. He was an alcoholic. I remember being thrown into a car late at night and driving up to Idabel, Oklahoma to either bail him out of jail or go see if he was dead in the hospital. I remember those trips because as a child, I'd be asleep one minute in a bed, and the next minute I'd be in the back seat in a car, and I didn't know where we were going or what was going on. And I never did understand this. But my grandfather died of alcoholism. The other 3 grandparents died of cancer. So my whole family was kind of just decimated in no time. And I never felt connected to my family. I felt connected to my grandfather for a little bit. He became my surrogate, but with his alcoholism, it didn't work out so well. I knew early on in life that I was an oddity. I was the only person that I knew, the only kid besides my brother, who didn't have a dad. And and we were treated like that. We were treated like orphans. And I knew I was an oddity. I knew I stood out. I didn't have friends. And by the time all these grandparents had died, I was in and out of trouble all the time. I was just ricocheting in and out of the principal's office all the time, in trouble all the time, causing trouble all the time. Anywhere I went, I caused trouble, and I liked it. And a part of my story is I don't mean to offend anybody in the room. It's part of my story. And the reason I bring it up is because I kind of came into AA the back doorway. By the time I hit 6th grade, I was miserable. And by then, I figured out what my stepbrothers were doing. And by golly, they looked like happy people. They were the happiest ones around because they were feeling no pain. So what did I do? I got into drugs. And I don't Mickey Mouse with anything. I didn't go to pot. I didn't do any of that stuff. I went straight for the psychotics. I wanted LSD. I wanted mescaline. And I took it in large doses. And I was finally out of my pain, and I was really glad for it. By the time I hit high school, I was a major drug seller. I was a very small, petite little kid. I was scrawny, but I was mean and I was tough. And if you crossed me, I might pull a knife out on you and just throw it at you. I was very mean. I was tough. I didn't put up with anybody's anything at any time of the day, night. I just learned early on in life that I had to fight for myself, and I just did. I did drugs through high school. I graduated in high school to the fact that I wasn't going to the principal's office. I was just kicked out of the schools at this point. I was just kindly asked several times to leave, sometimes not so kindly. And I was also forbidden from a lot of people's houses. People didn't want me hanging with their kids, imagine that. But I was out in trouble all the time. And when I was in high school, I was in class so little of the time that I couldn't have told you some semesters, some years, what my classes were. I had no idea what my classes were. Couldn't have picked out my books if I had to. I flunked I don't know how many courses, and yet I graduated, and I know I graduated because they wanted me gone. They wanted me out of there. And I got out, and I was 17 when I graduated. They were shoving me out the door as fast as they could. So I was 17 when I graduated, and by the time I was 17, I'd run away from home in all of this. I ran away from home all the time. All the time. It was just constantly running away from home. And by the time I hit 17, I knew this was my chance to get out that door. And I didn't know what to do with my life. My mom had told me that I was not really competent enough to support myself. So I didn't know that I could support myself. And I knew I had to get out of this house. I knew I had to start a new life. I didn't know what my options were. But wow, this guy came along and I thought, I'll marry him. And so we did. And I was 17 years old. And the sad thing is, I can't even stand up in here and tell you I had to get married. That's really sad. And I can't even really say I wanted to get married either. And my mother had to sign the papers because I was 17, and she did it very gladly. Goodbye. And I got married, and I went to college because I knew I had to do something with my life, and since my dad had been in the Air Force and died, I got paid to go to college. If I didn't go to college, I didn't get paid. Wow, that was a no-brainer. So I went to college, and I went to college with blank pages in this book. I didn't know literature. I didn't know history. I knew nothing. I mean, I had not studied in school. I don't know how I got out of there, but I got into college, and I remember sitting there and I looking at all those classes, and man, I admit I was the Renaissance woman in me was awakened. I mean, I couldn't sign up for enough classes. All of a sudden, I'm making A's. I made more honors. I could wallpaper a small bathroom with all the honors I got. My family was absolutely stunned. They couldn't believe it. I'm just like taking class after class after class. I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. I graduated with 157 hours, undergraduate degree. I at one time had asked my dean, I said, please, could I just get a degree in miscellaneous? Surely this counts for something. But I was trying to settle down and figure out what to do. In the meantime, in all this, this will come as a major shock. So really, hold on to your seats, okay? My first husband, he was an alcoholic. Oh my God, I know, you would never have guessed, would you? Okay. He was an alcoholic, so at school I'm looking good. At home, it's going downhill fast. I have 2 little boys now. It's really bad. I finally decided I love science. I really love science. God, I think that science became my new addict, because you couldn't pull me out of the lab. You couldn't pull me out of a book. And I wanted to be a doctor, and I wanted to be an anesthesiologist or surgeon, but I wanted to be in that operating room. And I was good at what I did. I was the top in my class. My family was amazed. My mom, you want to be a doctor? Are you kidding? We barely got you out of high school. But that's what I wanted. And I had my first husband was alcoholic. He was disintegrating very quickly. He would go to the liquor store. He would buy a pint of vodka or more, drink it out of the bottle, straight out of the bottle, in room temperature, throw it out on Northwest Expressway, walk into the house, and honey, I'm home. It was back to drama, trauma, and turmoil. I mean, I didn't know if I was coming or going. It was an awful situation. He lost his job. we had to move back in with my parents. We didn't have a roof over our head. I had not been in that house since I was 17 years old. I would have rather lived on the street, and if I hadn't have had these two little kids, I would have lived on the street before I went back to that home. But I had to move back into the home, and so now I am living with 3 bona fide alcoholics, 2 little boys, and I have 14 more hours before I can get out and go to med school. In the midst of all this, I realized I couldn't take it. I mean, I could not live with this man anymore. I didn't want to divorce him because I didn't want my kids growing up without a father like I had. And I hung on to the marriage as long as I possibly could. And finally, I couldn't do it anymore. And luckily, he got a job in California. I was still trying to finish my hours. And I found this was my escape hatch. And I was glad he was in California. And he came out trying to reconcile. And I said, I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce. And he said to me, this was his last-ditch effort to keep me in the marriage. If you leave me, I will never see those boys again, knowing what that would do to me. That was his last-ditch effort. And that was the last nail that sealed that coffin that we were done. I couldn't get to the attorneys fast enough to file. And as an alcoholic, that's one promise he kept. My boys were 8 and 12. When we were divorced. Today they're 33 and 37, and they've never seen their father since that day. It sounds sad, but it's been a blessing. It's been a real blessing because after I'd been in a year in recovery, I didn't know this at the time I was married to him. He was not only an alcoholic, he was running drugs and guns across the border with his cousin, and I didn't know any of this until after the divorce. He left. I was granted child support and alimony, but if you can't find somebody, you don't get anything. You just get I got stuck with the debt. And I researched him about a year into my recovery. Just something I felt compelled to do. And his story ended up a lot more tragic than mine. So the fact that he wasn't in my boy's life is really, really a blessing. Once the divorce went through and he was gone, I knew that if I went to med school, my boys would be orphans just like I was. You don't go to medical school without somebody there to support you. And I wasn't going to leave my boys in the care of my mom and my stepdad and have them go through what I went through. So I pulled out. And that cost me a lot. That hurt a lot at the time. And I want to emphasize at this point, I was not drinking. Everybody else around me was drinking, and all I could see was pathetic, disgusting alcoholics around me, and by God, I would never be like that, never. And I took my boys finally at one point. I had met Tom by now. He and his family owned an apartment complex, and he was living in the apartment. I took the apartment next door, and I moved out, and my mother just threw all sorts of fits. It wasn't that she wanted me. She didn't care if I moved out. She wanted my boys. And so there was a big dispute over that. I knew I wasn't going to seminary. I knew I had to figure out something. I had to figure something out quick, and it's a long story, so I'm not going to go into how it happened. I'm very dead serious when I say this is not my comfort zone, talking in front of people. I was given a full tuition scholarship to go to seminary. Not only was my all of my classes paid for, full tuition, they paid for all of my books if I would go to seminary. And I was like, a minister. Well, there's something I hadn't thought of. Wow. But it was free, and it got me in school 3 more years. And I didn't know what else could I do. I didn't want to wait tables. I don't make a good secretary. I play hell with staplers. I didn't know what else to do. I'd given this, I didn't have a call, and I'm Presbyterian. I didn't have a call. I had a full tuition scholarship. And again, I went to seminary, and I excelled. It was tough. I was working 3 part-time jobs, raising 2 little boys. The seminary was 2-hour drive from me. I was up all the time, going all the time. Not drinking. It's really important in my story that you all know that I didn't drink during this time. Because one thing that eliminated me from these rooms is I heard so many times from people, well, I started drinking when I was really little, and the first drink I had, just mellowed me out, and I felt so good, and I knew I was at home, and it made all my life's problems just melt away. Well, that wasn't my story, and that was one of the stories and one of the little cornerstones that I used to say, I'm not an alcoholic. I did try, when I was using drugs, my first time I had a drink, the very first time I was using drugs, one of the people in my group brought a bottle of Strawberry Boone Hill Farm wine, the best stuff in the house, you know. Of course, I know nothing about liquor. I can tell you all about drugs, but I know nothing about liquor. And, you know, when I took that first drink, I gagged. I mean, I thought, how on earth could anybody want to do that? Of course, I wanted to save my pride, so I did kind of muster down maybe half a cup. And I broke out in the worst, most severe case of hives I've ever had in my life, from the top of my head to the bottom of my toes. Just total rash. I've never been in such misery. I had no buzz. I felt like crap. I couldn't get enough Lanacane on. It was a horrible experience for me. And my motto after that was, why would you drink when you can take pills, get there faster, and get there better? I couldn't understand why people drank, and especially with my family background. So it's important for me to get across that I didn't drink during all this time, that I was not, the first drink didn't do anything for me, nothing. I hated it. I went on to seminary. Tom and I loved him, but... and we dated 5-6 years. I loved him, but he had 4 kids. They didn't like me. They didn't like my kids. We were trying to blend 6 kids. It wasn't working. I'd come from enough drama, trauma, and turmoil. I just didn't want any more in my life. So I graduated from seminary and took the church in Phoenix. And my older son was in college at that time. I took my 15-year-old and we went out to Phoenix. If there's anything that you can jump into from the frying pan into the fire, probably into the pits of hell, it was when I took my first church in Phoenix. I took a church because I wanted to be an associate pastor, and I wanted to have a senior minister so I could learn the ropes and learn them correctly. Wow, did I know that this was one of the most unstable, insane people that I would ever encounter in my life besides my ex-husband. This senior pastor was Looney Tune. I mean Looney Tune. I went to a situation, it was a large church. I ran the church, and I did not know what I was doing. He did not run the church, and people did not like him. They liked me, and this just caused friction behind the closed doors. All I can say is I lasted a whole year in Phoenix. It was one of the most bizarre times of my life. Single woman out in Phoenix with a 15-year-old. My car was stolen right off the get-go. It was used as a drug car to transport drugs throughout the desert. So, and lo and behold, boy, was I happy when they found that, and it was full of needles. Wow, that cop did me a lot of favor there. Anyway, I got my car back, and it was stolen again. I mean, at this point, it's like, please just give it up. I felt like a disaster magnet. I just kind of attracted disaster, and I couldn't really quite understand why. I don't understand everything that went on, but I was being stalked when I was in Phoenix. We never could figure out who it was, but they broke into my apartment. They stole my bra and underwear. They knew where I was. They would call the church. They knew when I was at the gym, and I had a very sporadic schedule because I was working 60, 70 hours a week. Watching people die. I mean, I'm trying to be a minister to this church, and all this is being hidden behind the scenes. I mean, I'm trying to keep everybody stable, and I'm not. And you know what happened right now at this time of my life? I started drinking. Man, if you just ordain the girl and you give her a church, man, she's ready to drink. And I did. My favorite thing was margaritas. And my favorite restaurant in Phoenix, Mexican restaurant, you can get the best margaritas there, Macaya's. And they don't serve margaritas, they serve mug-aritas. Man, and you know, you can go in there and you can buy your own mug, and it's hand-painted, and I thought of it as my communion goblet. Oh my God. I couldn't wait to get out of church, and if you brought your own mug in, which I always kept in my car, I cannot believe I did this, but I kept it in my car. If I brought my own mug, I could get $2 off my margarita, so it saved me a lot of money. And that thing went wherever I went. And I got toward the end where I was so bold that I would hold a couple of my committee meetings. I'd say, hey, you know what? I haven't been able to have lunch or dinner because I've been busy with my schedule. Why don't we go eat? And they'd say, oh, yeah, do you have a suggestion? Why don't we go to Macaya's? You know, it's funny how we just kept ending up there. And my church never realized I had a problem. I can't believe I never got a DUI. Nobody ever suspected. It never entered anybody's mind, much less mine. To me, it was just normal. I mean, I had a hard day. Why would I not want to drink? I'm watching people die. Why would I not want to drink? During this time, like I said, I only lasted out there a year, and probably thank God on that. I left in December. Tom would fly out once a month to come see me. He'd asked me to marry him. I said, no, I served that prison term with Craig. I'm not about to do that with anybody else. In August of the following year, he came out, he flew out one more time, and he took me over to San Diego. And I guess they just have margaritas all along the coast. And he said, I'm going to take you out to eat. So we go out to eat. I did not eat anything. I drank my dinner. I don't know how many margaritas I had, but I had a belly full, and I was a happy girl, and I don't remember just a whole lot. The only thing I mainly remember is he put the ring on my finger, and he said, I've been coming out here for a month. I've dated you for 5-6 years. I've asked you to marry me. I love you. I want to get married, but if you don't want to do this, I need to get on with my life. And he put the ring on my finger, and with my eyes crossed, being the romantic, loving woman that I am, I said, oh my God, I think we have to get married. The ring fits. And that is the last thing I remember. Until I woke up the next morning and realized I was engaged, and oh my gosh, what have I done? And I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I knew I needed to get out of this church because there was so much conflict. There was so much things happening behind the scenes. Because I had kind of been the underdog all my life, I always gravitated toward the underdog, and I always tried to save people because I couldn't save myself, so I was trying to save people. I got involved with trying to eradicate some gang problems, and it's a long story again, but it was a bad decision on my part. My 15-year-old son, a gang member, he was 21 years old, got a hold of my son. By the time I got on the scene, my son had been beaten to such a pulp I couldn't even recognize his face. And it really kind of went downhill from there. I married Tom in November, but I had to stay in Phoenix. In fact, another little side trip story. I was flying into Oklahoma in November to go marry Tom, and it was red eye. And it was 6 o'clock in the evening, and I was really scared. It's like, oh, God, I'm going to get married again. What's wrong with me? The anxiety level was just immense. And one of my friends called me, and she said, how are you doing? I said, not well. I said, I can't believe I'm doing this. I need help. I'm scared. She goes, why don't we go to dinner? I was like, well, how about Micaiah's? I had an answer for that question. And so we did. She took me to Micaiah's, and I drank margaritas, and I got liquored up, and it was like I had these little flashes of that night. I had this flash of I was in Micaiah's with my friend drinking nothing. Then I had a flash of me sitting on the floor in my bedroom between my dresser and my bed, and the director of education had come into my house. I had an empty suitcase in my bed. She's throwing stuff into my suitcase going, what are you thinking? You're supposed to be on the plane in less than an hour. And she put all sorts of stuff in there. She packed up my bag. Okay, black, gone, don't know what happened. And all of a sudden, I'm getting off of a plane, and I'm walking, and I'm trying to figure out, where in the hell am I? Because I'm getting off a plane. I don't know where I am. And I get off, and I see Tom, and Tom walks up to me, and he goes, I got a call from Carrie. He said that he got you on the plane, and you are now my problem. Good luck. And he should have known to run then. And I was like, wow. Tom and I got married. I had to send Trenton back home early because we were afraid he would be hurt more. So we had to send him to Oklahoma. I had to stay with the church a little longer, and I left and went back. Tom and I got married. Like I said, I curtailed my drinking when I moved to Oklahoma. I just didn't drink as much. I took some more churches. I had 2 more churches. I just didn't drink as much. It's not that I didn't drink. I just didn't drink as much. And I didn't get drunk as often. Tom, for one thing, Tom and I, we didn't realize this when we got married. When we got married, we had 6 children between us, and we didn't realize this at the time. I don't know, we're not really bright, I don't know what, but all 6 of them were teenagers. Wow. So we got married in a war zone. And the first year, the contract between us was whoever filed for divorce first got all 6 kids. And I think that's actually kept us together that first year because it was a war zone. It was bad. And I can't believe I didn't drink much during that time. Kids grew up, moved out of the home. Tom came to me one day and he says, I've got this brilliant idea. Always beware when your husband comes home with a brilliant idea. We haven't really been on the East Coast. You've always wanted to be by the beach. I'm tired of building houses here. Let's go to the East Coast and I'll build cell towers. And you could be by the beach. We'll go build them and we'll be by the beach. And I was like, okay, let's do that. Oh, and let's do it in an RV. I don't know what I was thinking when I agreed to this, but I agreed to this. And you know what? This is the amazing thing. I had a church at that time. I was a senior pastor by then. I had to stay with this church longer, and he came out, and he was at Virginia Beach, stationed at Virginia Beach. That's my holy land, the beach, you know, and he was stationed there. The day I came to North Carolina and moved here, he moved that RV to Smithfield, North Carolina. I kid you not. It is the armpit of, oh, it doesn't even qualify there. I'm not a small town girl. We went from Smithfield and it got better fast. Cameron, I was lonely. I made no friends out here. I was mad. I didn't have a church. I didn't realize what that would do to me. My kids had moved. I had no purpose. I remember sitting on Cameron thinking if I died now, nobody would discover me for, minimum of 2 weeks. I just was so unhappy. And Tom was gone all the time trying to get this company going. And I dissolved into a bottle. I found my comfort there. It was my new best friend. I had a dog at that time. I pack up my dog and my bottle and we go to Florida. I pack up my dog and my bottle and we go to North Carolina Beach somewhere. We go back to Oklahoma. We did whatever we had to do. Our marriage was fragile at that time, obviously. But during that time, at one point in there, Tom and I took a trip to Canada. We were in Canada for 2 weeks, and we took the red eye back into town, and we came back into RDU, and it was late at night. It was 12 o'clock at night. We got our luggage. We got on the tram, and there was a backup band on the thing, and they were partying, having fun, drunk and high and all that, and they wanted us to go with them, and we're jovial and partying and laughing with them, and we weren't going to go with them. We were tired, but just laughing, and Tom gets a phone call. And I could tell his mood dropped, boom. It went fast. And I turned to him and I said, what happened? What's wrong? And he said, we'll talk about it when we get to the car. And I said, please just tell me which one was it? And he said, it was Trenton. It was my son, my youngest. And Trenton and I had a fight over his motorcycle the week before I left. And he was on his motorcycle. He was on company time. He should have been in a company truck, but he took his motorcycle. And a guy in an old Cadillac ran a stop sign and hit him. And Trenton was medevaced into Duke Hospital. I have, as a minister, I've seen a lot of blood. I've seen people die. I've seen a lot of trauma. I walked in that emergency room and I saw my son. I've never seen that much blood in my whole life. And I remember my son just barely hanging in there and saying, Mom, I'm okay. It's going to be all right. And I knew it wasn't. I'd like to say this. It severed his femoral artery. He should have bled out right there on the scene. He was in Lumberton, North Carolina. It was out in the middle of nowhere, and a nurse out of nowhere just happened to be there. She got out there. She put a tourniquet on him, or he would have bled out and been dead right there on the scene. She got in the ambulance and took him to the hospital. We had tried to contact her and never could find her. If you don't believe in angels, I believe in angels because that woman was God sent. She saved my son's life. We were in Duke Hospital for a little less than a month. Trenton had 12 pints of blood, 8 surgeries. I fought for him to keep his leg. The tibia was totally demolished. I called every favor out that I could. Every doctor I knew in every congregation I'd ever served, I called. I got on the internet. I had a medical background. The doctor knew it. I kept thinking if you could transplant a heart, if you can transplant a leg, I'd give him my leg. I'd do anything. I would do anything to save him. And in the end, the doctor said, your son's not going to listen to anybody but you, and you need to tell him he has to have the leg amputated. It was... You could watch during each surgery, the connective tissue was dying. There was nothing left. And I called for help. I actually asked for help at this point. I called the chaplain of the hospital. I said, please meet me in the chapel. I don't have the words. I don't have the strength to tell my son this. And the chaplain set up a time for me. I went to the chapel, and I watched the clock like that one back there, and minute tick and tick and tick, and it got all the way up to 45. I waited 45 minutes for that chaplain, and he never showed up. Never showed up. As a minister, I went out any time of day or night. I was always there. Anytime I was called, I was there. This, to me, was like all the drops in my life, all the times in my life, all of a sudden came to this apex, this 1 second in my life. And when I walked out of that chapel, I was a changed woman, because when I was in there, I told God I wanted to destroy that whole chapel. I did everything in my being not to destroy that chapel. I wanted God out of my life. There's a saying in the Bible that God can take your sins and put them far between the east and the west from you. And I said, I'll keep my sins. I want you as far as I can from the east to the west. And I went on a drinking binge that was pretty amazing. I drank. I didn't cause trouble, relative speaking. I didn't get a DUI. I didn't do those things. My son took his amputation better than I did. He healed better than I did. I hid a lot of things from him, but I think probably in the long run he probably saw the hurt that I felt. My son and I are very close. I couldn't quit drinking. I could not stop drinking. I couldn't get enough. A gallon of wine was not enough. 2 gallons probably wouldn't have been enough. I liked drinking. I drank and I drank and I drank, and it didn't stop. Of course, my marriage started crumbling, and how I got into recovery was Tom was a problem, and so I went to a counselor. I called the counselor, and the loving wife that I was and the concerned wife, I wanted to give our marriage one more try. I took my Blue Cross Blue Shield card. I got onto the internet and found the closest one, and by golly, she was only half a block from my gym, so bang, she had to have been it. I went in to see her to set her up for being against Tom. And she said, in the middle of our talking, she said, I'd like to give you a test. And I said, okay, whatever. She said, I want to give you a sassy test. And I said, you don't need to give me a sassy test. I got a mouth that's 100% sassy, no test involved. And she said, no, I really need you to take this test. And so I said, okay. So I took the test. I thought, if it gets the ball rolling, let's do it. So I did that. And she sat there, and after I finished, she looked at it. She said, have you ever considered that you're an alcoholic? And I said, no, what's that got to do with anything? And she said, you may be an alcoholic. And I said, I don't think I am. And she said, everything on this test and what you're talking about says you're an alcoholic. And I said, no, I'm not an alcoholic. I have a crappy marriage. Just help me with the marriage. And the way I handle things like this, if somebody in front of me doesn't say what I want to hear them say, I usually get up and leave. And I'll go find somebody who will say what I want to hear them say. And this woman got up and walked across the room, and I would have left if this hadn't happened. She got up and walked across the room, and I watched her carefully. And I said, are you an amputee? And she looked at me just shocked, and I said, you have my son's gait. My son's an amputee. And she said, yeah, I am. She had lost her leg in a motorcycle wreck. And the only reason I stayed with her, I felt compelled to stay with her because she knew what I'd gone through with my son. And I agreed to go to the meetings. I didn't work the program at first. I rebelled against this. I was a one-chip girl, month chip girl. I get a chip, leave, get a chip. And my 1 month chip meant nothing to me because it was just my chip of proof. It was proof that I wasn't an alcoholic. I could quit anytime I wanted. But I'd go back. Marriage kept going badly, so I moved back to Oklahoma, and it was 40 days. I called my 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness. It was the whole time, triple digits in Oklahoma. I'm going to hurry here. I joined a group called the May Club. It was a really tough crowd. The women, there were former Hells Angels people in the group, and the women, that was the women. They were very, very tough on me. They treated me with kid gloves at first, and then they got where they kind of were sarcastic with me, you know. I wouldn't talk, I wouldn't have anything to do with them, but I would go and listen to them. I did go and listen. I absorbed every word they said. But I was miserable at this time. I wasn't working the program. I did have a sponsor, but she was tucked safely back here in North Carolina. And I never called her. But I got so miserable at this time that I did start calling her. I'd call her, and it was like, I remember hearing one time somebody saying, if you don't think you're an alcoholic, take away the bottle, and let's see if you flip out. You're probably an alcoholic. Well, I flipped out. Man, I got nutty as a Looney Tune. I couldn't figure out if I was coming to go on. I didn't want to be married. I wanted to be married. I didn't want to go to AA. I wanted to go to AA. I mean, I was just all over the map. And I would call her, and she would say, and I'd just give her all my garbage. And she would say, I want you to calm down, go to a meeting. And I said, I've been to a meeting. Well, go to another meeting. You know, it's hard to sponsor somebody halfway across the nation. And she said, go to a meeting, calm down, listen, keep an open mind. And I did that a couple of times with her. And then one night, I had not eaten for a long time. I hadn't slept. I was tired. It was 8:30 at night. And I called her, and I blah, 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 whatever my tragedy was then. And I said, I'm sure you want me to go to a meeting. And she said, no, I don't want you to go to a meeting. I was like, oh my gosh, the crap has hit the fan. I said, you don't want me to go to a meeting? Are you giving up on me? And she said, no. She said, you're tired. You're not in the state of mind to be driving a car. And she said, I want you to find one project in your house, and I want you to focus on it, and I want you to complete one project in your house. Well, four boys in my house living with all their friends up and down. We had 50 boxes when we moved out here that nobody seemed to claim or know what was in it. I went up there and randomly, out of all these boxes, picked one box, took it downstairs, and went through it. And when I opened it, it was 3 scrapbooks, 3 very old scrapbooks I've never seen before in my life. I started looking through them, and they were my dad's scrapbooks. When my grandfather died back when I was in elementary school, my aunt came in and scarfed up all my dad's stuff. I had a few pictures and some medals that he had done, but I didn't have anything else. She said that my brother and I were too immature to own anything of Jim the God. So I didn't have anything. And I, to this day, cannot tell you where those scrapbooks came from. I don't know how I came to have them. I didn't even know they existed. I seriously didn't know. I stayed up all night going through them. And my dad had made a scrapbook of his life from 5th grade to 12th grade till the time he graduated. It took him through his whole life. Schools, churches, everything, you name it. And I decided that night what I was going to do. I loaded up my car with his scrapbooks, a blanket. I got some water. The girls had nourishment, so I had 2 chocolate chip cookies. And I took some of my dad's medals. And the next day I took a map and I went and found Holdenville, Oklahoma. And I could hit that scrapbook, those scrapbooks, read his story, and go through Holdenville and see where he had gone to school, where he had been baptized, where he was also buried, the church where he was buried. I went through all those things, and it took me all day. I went through the town of Holdenville. At the end of the day, two big funeral homes in Holdenville, I found where my father was buried, and I went to the gravesite. I didn't think it would affect me at all. Wouldn't affect me. I'm tough. I'm mean. I'm hard. And as soon as I saw that stone, I bawled like a baby. Could not quit crying. Could not. And even gotten out of my car. Went to the grave, and a rage came over me. I mean, that's how I deal with my pain, is I go into a rage. And I went into a rage. I mean, I was so mad. The F-bomb came out I don't know how many times. I had no idea I was carrying this kind of rage toward this man. What kept coming out is, you would rather be a Top Gun superhero than be my dad. You left me with that woman and those crazy people. I could not believe he would have done that. And I remember sitting on the ground getting my feet ready because I wanted to just kick the tombstone over. And all this energy, I mean, finally it just kind of dissipated. And I realized my dad died when he was 24 years old. And it's an amazing thing. That's when my son almost died, was at 24, when he lost his leg. And I thought about how lively and the full of zest my son is. And I'm sure my dad was that way. And I don't think my dad wanted to die. I mean, and I didn't even know that I'd been thinking that all these years. And that was a pivotal point for me in my recovery. I sat down and I read my dad's scrapbooks with him, and I gave him one of his medals, and I told him goodbye. And I went home and I started working this program. And I actually allowed this program to start healing me. I didn't think I needed to be healed. I didn't think I was an alcoholic. I started listening, not just listening, but actually doing some of the things that you all suggested. I spent 10 months on step 1, so what? As part of my step 3, I was on step 3 when I did this. As part of my step 3, one of the reasons I hated AA so much was because the solution you all were offering me, I'd walked out on at Chapel in Durham years back in Duke. Step 3 was God came to believe in a God that could bring me back to sanity. I just didn't believe God cared about me that much. God was not in my corner. And after I left the grave today, I knew he was. I knew that I had a God and that this God did love me. And I went home and I had the diamonds from my dad's engagement ring he gave my mom. She'd given me those diamonds. And I had his wings, and I went and had the diamonds. I designed the diamonds into these wings. And that's my third step present and reminder to me that I do have a God, and that my God does love me, and my God does want good things for me. And I didn't believe that until I did that gravesite thing. I have worked the program. I've worked it hard, and I've gotten a lot of good things out of here. My marriage with Tom today, I remember telling my sponsor, Linda, I want out of this marriage. I want him divorced. And she was always saying, don't make a big decision in the first year. And I was like, what the heck do you think you know? And I just wanted out of the marriage. I thought if I got rid of Tom, I'd get rid of the problem. And thank God I didn't, because I go home to one of the most amazing men, one of the most amazing people that I've ever met in my whole life. The bond between us is so strong. It would never have been that if I hadn't gone through this program. I have friendships I never thought I would have. I do things I never thought I'd do, like stand right here. I have wings, I can fly. And my time's up, but I just want to say that all my life I really did. I felt like a misfit. I felt like an oddity. I didn't belong anywhere. I didn't belong to anyone. And then all of a sudden, I guess a couple months ago, I was sitting around in these rooms and I was looking around and I realized all this time it wasn't me. I just hadn't had a chance to meet you guys yet. So thanks.